This is Research Like a Pro, episode 252, How Accurate Are Thrulines? Welcome to Research Like a Pro, a genealogy podcast about taking your research to the next level, hosted by Nicole Dyer and Diana Elder, accredited genealogist professional. Diana and Nicole are the mother-daughter team at FamilyLocket.com and the authors of Research Like a Pro, a genealogist guide. With Robin Worthland, they also co-authored the companion volume, Research Like a Pro with DNA. Join Diana and Nicole as they discuss how to stay organized, make progress in their research, and solve difficult cases. Let's go! Today's episode is brought to you by findagrave.com, the best place to search online for burial information for your family, friends, and famous people. At Find a Grave, you'll find details about cemeteries and individual memorials for the people buried in those cemeteries. Hello, and welcome to Research Like a Pro.
Hi, Nicole. How are you today?
I'm great, Mom. How are you?
I'm doing well. The sun is shining, the snow has melted, and we are into spring, so it feels fabulous.
How have you been going with your Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy class?
Well, I am doing part of two Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy courses. I'm coordinating with my colleague, the one on accreditation, and I'm an instructor in Angela McGee's course, which is titled The Art of Client Reports. So let me just explain a little bit to our listeners what these institutes are. You typically have to register months in advance. Then you get to be part of the class. They cap the number of people, and so the classes can be anywhere from, say, 20 up to 60, just depending on how many people the instructor wants to have in the class. The one for our accreditation course, we have 21 people who are attending that. And then for Angela McGee's course, The Art of Client Reports, there are maybe up to 45, 50, I'm not sure. So I have been attending that. As an instructor, I get to attend and watch the different classes. And because I do a lot with client reports, I'm very interested in seeing all the different ways people approach that. It's really been interesting. But I did teach my class on writing from the research log and tips from an editor. So that was really fun to show how I do the writing, and I think you do it the same way, where we put everything into the research log that we do on Airtable. And with Airtable, you can expand that cell and really write quite a bit that later you could copy and paste out from the report. And I showed how I would take data from, say, a run of tax lists and then just copy and paste that right into a table in the report. So I just showed a lot of examples on how I had done a report, and I shared that report with the class so they could go read the full thing if they wanted. So that was a fun class to prepare and then teach.
Yeah, that sounds really great, and the whole course sounds interesting. So for those who aren't familiar with the Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy, they have several different offerings, and this one is part of the Academy for Professionals, right?
Yes.
So Academy at SLIG, which is the acronym SLIG, SLIG, for Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy. The Academy at SLIG is usually once a week for a few weeks, right?
Yes, it's 5 weeks, and you meet all day. So we do our accreditation course on Thursdays all day, and then the writing reports is all day on Friday, so I can attend both.
This used to be in person, but since COVID, they've been virtual.
Right. It used to be just a week after the regular Institute week. Things have changed quite a bit with COVID, and this has been a good change. For both of these courses, there's a significant amount of homework because you learn so much more if you're actually putting into practice what you're learning in class. And so breaking that up by a week lets you have a lot of time to do your assignment, get some peer review, let things soak in. So I think it's been a great change.
Right. And then the Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy has a regular session is usually in January, right?
Yeah, it's in January, and that one is just an intensive week. So you get it all done in 1 week, Monday through Friday, but it is pretty intense. Those classes don't often have as much homework, or if they do have homework, it's more optional. It's just a chance to go try out some of the websites or some of the methodologies you're learning. And so I found that intense week works really well. For instance, I did a course in January that was coordinated by Josh Taylor, and it was all about the migration from New England to the Midwest, so out to Ohio, Indiana, that type of area. And we had just like some fun homework, nothing that took very much time. So that was great. I like having the different options.
Right. And they also have the fall virtual option, which is similar to Academy, where you meet once a week for several weeks. And I have been helping teach a course in that for the last couple of years. And I'm doing it again this year about using DNA evidence to prove your pedigree. And I teach a class about tracking your matches with Airtable. So these are typically intermediate level or advanced level classes, and they fill up quickly. So if you're interested in someday taking an institute course, then we recommend finding out when registration begins and putting that date on your calendar, and then planning in advance, your first and second choices for what course you want to do, so that when you go on the day to register online, you'll be ready to sign up right away.
Some of the classes sell out literally in 3 minutes, and I have gotten into some of those because I was ready and waiting and was so excited when I got in.
Well, I hope that helps for some of you who had questions about these institutes that we're always talking about.
Right, we didn't know anything about institutes when we first started doing our genealogy. We hope all of you will go try one out. So besides the Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy, there's GRIP, the Genealogy
Research Institute of Pittsburgh.
Thank you. I never could remember how that one was. And then there's IGHR, which is the one in Georgia.
The Institute of Genealogical and Historical Research.
Oh, very good with your acronyms.
I know.
And then there are a couple other. There's GenFed, which takes place in Washington, D.C., and they visit the National Archives and learn all about that.
Yeah, that one stands for something about genealogical federal records.
Right. And there's others. I think there are others out there, but those are the three main ones. I've never yet been to GenFed, but I have done the other three all online.
There's also the Texas Institute.
Oh, yeah. I did that one too.
That one's pretty good too.
Yeah, it's such a great opportunity. This online learning is just amazing. I know that the one in Pittsburgh is doing an in-person session this summer, one online and one in person, I believe.
Great.
All right, well, let's do our announcements. We have our Airtable Quick Reference Guide available for you in PDF form on our website if you're learning about Airtable and just want to have something in front of you to help you remember all the different things you can do with it and how to do them. That would be great for you. We also have our Research Like a Pro webinar series for 2023 ongoing, and we are just loving these webinars. In fact, one of the questions that I had during that class in the Art of Client Reports was, we would just like to see how you had did a complete project all the way through. And I thought to myself, well, that's what we are doing in our webinar series, because that's what we're showing all the way from getting an objective nailed down to writing the report. So we have in May, the topic is Who Are the Parents of Catherine A.E. Sayre? And it's a DNA case study by Barb Groth. Barb is a Research Like a Pro DNA study group member, and we're excited to see that. Every project is so different and interesting, and I pick up little tips from everybody. I love it. Our next Research Like a Pro study group is this fall, starting the end of August, going through November. And our peer group leader application is on our website. So if you'd like to be a part of that and you get to have complimentary registration and work with a small group of people, we've had peer groups from the past who are still meeting every month to be accountable and talk about their research. So it's a really fun way to make some connections with other researchers. And then join our newsletter for coupons. Coming up pretty quick, the National Genealogical Society Family History Conference in person in Richmond, Virginia. And there is a live at home option, so you can participate if you don't want to travel as well.
And that's how I'll be participating. So I'm looking forward to that live at home option.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, today we have a listener spotlight, and it's from listener who is called Dragon Wings 121. This listener says, I appreciate what you all do, and I love getting help each week. And then she says, question, how accurate are through lines? I think I understand how it works. If one person in my group of matches is wrong, could it lead everyone down the wrong path? So this is such a great question. I think so many of us have questions about our Thurlines hypotheses on AncestryDNA. We have talked about this in the past, but I thought it would be fun to just do another podcast episode on it and to touch again on Thurlines and how we can kind of figure out if a Thurlines hypothesis is correct or not.
Oh, I think this is a great topic. This is such an important thing because Thurlines makes it really easy for us to find some matches to an ancestor, but there are so many errors just because of the way it works. So this will be fun to go back through. Well, we have an article in Family Locket that Nicole wrote titled How to Evaluate a Through-Lines Hypothesis. And then we also did a podcast episode based on that, and that is episode 130. So you could go back and listen to that. But since then, we have had some updates and changes to Ancestry, and those are wonderful changes. So a big one that came into play just a few months ago was the new SideView technology. And this is where Ancestry splits up your matches by parent. And there's a really good article written really well for the beginner in genealogy so that you can see exactly how this is happening. It is through Ancestry support. It's titled How SideView Technology Splits Your DNA Results by Parent. So I just wanted to read a couple things from that because it's good for us to understand. We don't, of course, understand all the science and the algorithms that go into this, but we can get an overview and have a basic understanding. And so what they say at the very beginning is when we first read your DNA, we don't know which parts of your DNA came from each parent. Ancestry developed a technology called SideView to sort this out using DNA matches. Because a match is usually related to you through only one parent, your matches can help us organize the DNA you shared with them. So, of course, this is how they also work with the ethnicities and the ethnicity inheritance, so they can split that up as well. But it is a good thing for us to use so that when we see these through lines, we can use SideView to see if we have got that DNA match actually on the right side of the family. It gives us just another tool in our tool bucket. So one of the things that you need to know is that they are using your closest cousins to figure this out. And you need a lot of shared DNA segments on both sides of your family because our DNA is just made up of letters. And so this is what Ancestry says, how SideView works. When we first read your DNA, it's all just a long line of those famous DNA letters. A for adenine, G for guanine, C for cytosine, and T for thymine. Those are the building blocks of DNA. So then they show, like a little diagram showing that you get, for instance, an A from your mom or a G from your dad or vice versa, but they don't know which is which. And so they have to compare a sequence of letters with a sequence of letters from one of your matches. And they like to use the closer matches, like first cousin, second cousin, so that it's just more clear about which side of the family it's on, maternal or paternal. And then they don't actually say maternal or paternal. When you first look at SideView, you see parent 1 and parent 2. And then you have to look at all the surnames that are in trees and your closest matches, and you get to assign yourself whether it's maternal or paternal. And if we know our ancestry, that can be pretty easy. And if we've had enough matches, that can be pretty easy. If it's an adoptee case, then you're not going to know at first which one is maternal and which is paternal if you have no idea who all these people are that you match. And then you have to do more work and try to figure that out. And you can always go back and change. If you have designated one maternal, one paternal, and you have to change it, you can always change that up. And then they also have a lot of people who are unassigned, and that's because they're either new matches since they did, the initial split, and it sounds like they'll kind of be updating that every so often, or they're just so small, and the really small matches they can't tell. And so anyway, it's an exciting new technology, and I think it's really helpful in a lot of things, not only the ethnicity, which is great, but also this idea of evaluating through lines and some of the matches we see there.
That was a great overview of SideView. Now let's do an overview of Throughlines, because we can use SideView to help us evaluate Throughlines hypotheses. There is an Ancestry support article about Throughlines, and it gives you kind of some background information on how they're created and how they work. And the first thing that it says in the article is that the Throughlines are based on information from family trees. And it actually says if there's inaccurate information in your tree, you may receive inaccurate Throughlines. The tree that is used for your Throughlines hypotheses is the family tree that is linked to your DNA test. And the Throughlines algorithm finds ancestors that are in your tree and also in your matches trees. but they also give you hints for potential ancestors that are not in your tree yet, just in your matches trees. To make Throughlines work for you, you need to make sure your tree is either public or private and searchable. But if you have marked it private and unsearchable, then Throughlines cannot work. Also, Throughlines are only for your ancestors that are through your fifth great grandparents, so 7 generations. It won't give you any Throughlines for sixth great grandparents or beyond. And then to make Throughlines work, you need to have at least 4 generations. So yourself, parent, grandparent, and great grandparents. Once you have that and you've linked your test to the tree, then Throughlines should appear in 48 hours.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about how to explore them. One of the things you may have done is just looked at it through relationship view. That is the default view. That's where you see the little box of each ancestor and you get to see the relationship and their dates. If you have a picture, their picture will show up. And it's basically kind of a pedigree chart in a certain format. But you can also use the list view, and this shows your matches, but it doesn't illustrate their line of descent. And it will be organized by the largest matches showing up first, so that's really helpful to find those that share more DNA with you. And then you can also see, as you're scrolling down through the relationship view, potential ancestors, and these are highlighted in green, and these are people you don't have in your tree, but other people have connected them to their tree. And so Throughlines has found some way going back and forth between your tree and the other trees to connect you to that ancestor. And you can use the filters. Filters are great. They're up at the top, and you can filter for ancestors with new DNA matches, your ancestors just in your actual tree, paternal, maternal ancestors, or these potential ancestors.
So now that we have kind of a basis of what Throughlines is, how do we know if they're accurate or not? So the support article from Ancestry about Throughlines doesn't state that they are definitely accurate. It actually talks about how if there's inaccurate information in your tree, you may receive inaccurate Throughlines. And so it says in the article, on your Throughlines page, click on an ancestor to see which DNA matches may be related to you through that person. And I like that the article uses that qualifier because it does take some work and some evaluation and analysis on our part to see if that DNA match is related to us through the ancestor Throughlines suggests. And we have to do this with all of our matches that we want to use as DNA evidence in a genealogical proof argument. So this is just something that we need to practice and start doing. And we'll talk about some different ways to do that. In the Throughline support article, they actually have a whole section about accuracy. And I'll read to you a couple of the quotes from that. It says, since Throughlines are based on the family trees of you and other members on Ancestry, they are as accurate as the trees they're based on. Mistakes in family trees can cause inaccurate Throughlines. It goes on to say, because they are based on trees, Throughlines don't prove your specific connection to a DNA match. And I thought that was really important, so I'll repeat it. Because they're based on trees, Throughlines don't prove your specific connection to a DNA match. For example, if you have someone listed in your tree as a second cousin, and that person appears as a DNA match and in a Throughline as your second cousin, they could still actually be a first cousin once removed, a half first cousin, or a number of other relationships to you. So just because we're seeing it in Throughlines and that's what we add in our tree, doesn't mean that it's really true. We need to do analysis. And one of the ways we can do analysis is by clicking on the amount of DNA that you share with the match in Ancestry, and it opens up a chart showing different relationship possibilities and how likely they are based on Ancestry's algorithm and their probabilities that they've calculated. Sometimes you'll see like, oh, there's a 50% chance of this relationship and a 40% chance of this one. And when the probabilities are close like that, we need to do additional work to figure out which one is most likely. And we can do this by looking at shared matches, by looking at the documentary evidence, by looking at trees and figuring everything out. But what it comes down to is a body of evidence that we combine all the different clues together to come to a conclusion. And that's such an important concept for using DNA evidence, that we need to gather kind of a whole court case of evidence as if we were going to present it to a jury and tell them all the reasons why this is true and accurate. And once we have gathered all of that evidence and we have a good body of evidence, then we can feel more confident in our conclusions.
I especially love what you said, the body of evidence. That's great. Well, now we have a word from our sponsor, findagrave.com. Findagrave.com makes it easy to find the graves of ancestors, create virtual memorials, and add photos or virtual flowers to a loved one's memorial. You can search by name, location, cemetery, date, and more. Find a Grave members add more information each day, so if you've searched the site before without finding what you were looking for, come back and check again. Looking for a way to give back to your community? Download the free Find a Grave app, visit your local cemetery, and add missing grave information to the site. It's an easy and fun way to spend some time outside and help other people who are searching for their family and friends. Findagrave.com is completely free to use, so start your search today at findagrave.com. All right, so you gave us a lot of thoughts about checking the accuracy of Thurlines, but let me just add a couple things to that discussion. We can use the Shared Centimorgan Project or Ancestry probabilities to check the relationship that Thurlines is giving us. And then we can check to see if the matches are all grouped to the same parent. So parent 1 or parent 2, or if we have assigned labels maternal or paternal. It's okay if some of them are unassigned, because Thurlines will pick up those really small matches of, say, 10 centimorgans or so, but they should mostly all be on the right side. And so if not, it could be that both parents are related to that ancestor due to pedigree collapse, which means your parents are related, or some of the matches are simply incorrect.
Right. And I think that happens more often than we think, that some of the matches are false matches or just don't belong in that Through-lines hypothesis. It's possible that we do have some matches that are correct in the Through-lines hypothesis, that they really do descend from that ancestor. And then there could be some incorrect ones that aren't sharing due to that common ancestor. So what's so great about the parent 1, parent 2, maternal, paternal labels is that now it makes it so much easier to analyze our Through-lines hypotheses to see if they are all grouped to the same parent. In the article I wrote about evaluating your Through-lines hypothesis, I was using an example where the test taker's mother had tested, so we could see that information easily with that example. But unless you've had a parent test, you wouldn't have that until now. Now that they have introduced the SideView technology at Ancestry, everyone can use this method to check their Through-lines hypothesis to see if the matches are all on the mother's side or all on the father's side, or all on parent 1 side or all on parent 2 side. And so it's exciting to have this new ability to check our Through-lines hypotheses. And so let's do an example. I'm going to use the same test taker that I had used in my past article about evaluating Through-lines hypotheses, and I'll call her Deanna. So the first Through-lines that I opened for Deanna was a Through-lines hypothesis for the parents of her ancestor, Lucinda Jones. And Lucinda is on Deanna's mother's side. And Lucinda was born in the early 1800s in Tennessee. And if you know a lot about researching in Tennessee, you'll know that there are some challenges with record loss and not a lot of good record keeping. So it's challenging to find the parents of those ancestors in the early 1800s in Tennessee. Well, Lucinda's maiden name is Jones. She married a Harris, but the Through-lines hypothesis gives us her father's name as John Early Harris, which is actually her husband's last name. So right away, that was a red flag to me that this was just based on someone's incorrect tree that has her married name as her name instead of her maiden name. Then I looked at all the different matches, and there were 17 DNA matches descending from John Early Harris. I noticed right away that only 3 of those matches shared more than 15 centimorgans. So that's a red flag. You know, we are looking back at an ancestor probably born in the 1700s, but there should be more matches over 15 centimorgans, I think. I just feel that if most of the matches are sharing 8, 9, or 10, 11 centimorgans, that there's just such a higher chance that some of those matches are false matches. And maybe they're not, and it's possible that they're all true matches. But when you have small segment matches like that, where they're just sharing one single segment of 8 centimorgans, It increases the possibility that those matches are sharing with you because of a very distant ancestor born in the 1600s or before, and you don't know the common ancestor because it's so far back. So it could be like a population segment. It could be a really distant ancestor. It could be a false match. So those are some of the concerns with using those small matches. And since in this hypothesis, I already had a clue from the documentary evidence that it was wrong and the matches were small, that was 2 red flags against it. So then I did my next test to evaluate it, which was all of the matches should be on the mother's side because this ancestor was on Deanna's mother's side of her tree. So if the matches are correct and they truly do descend from this John Early Harris, and he is a maternal ancestor of Deanna, then all of the matches should be labeled either maternal or unassigned. However, although most of those 17 matches were maternal, 5 of them were labeled as paternal matches. So that was another red flag. So we've got 3 strikes against this Throughline's hypothesis so far. What I did to analyze the matches was I just put all 17 of them in a quick spreadsheet in Google Sheets. And I created a column for whether they were maternal or paternal and a column for if they were shared matches with each other. So that was kind of my next test. And I looked at each of the shared matches for all of the 17 matches, and I kind of did a mini Leeds method. It wasn't a true Leeds method, but I just kind of did a color for anyone who was a shared match with each other. And then I was going to do another color if, any of the other matches were shared matches with each other, but they weren't. There were only 5 matches who were shared matches with each other. Most of them were shared matches with the highest match that shared over 20 centimorgans. I think she shared 25. And so there were 4 other matches who had this woman listed as the shared match with them. So I gave them all a pink color, and they were all maternal. So there were 5 that seemed like they were in the same maternal genetic network, and then 7 more that were not in that same genetic network. They were maternal matches, but as far as I could tell, they weren't shared matches with each other. One caveat with that is that Ancestry only shows shared matches over 20 centimorgans, so they could have been shared matches with each other, just maybe they were sharing less than 20. And most of them were sharing less than 20 with the test taker, so that was the challenge there. So that was interesting to me to see that, this Throughline's hypothesis failed all my tests. It didn't really have a lot of good things going for it. The documentary evidence seemed incorrect. It had common names. It was from an early time period. The matches were all small. They didn't all group to the same side, maternal or paternal, and only some of them were shared matches with each other.
That's a great example of really having to go through a lot of analysis. And I love the idea about the spreadsheet. That was a great idea. Well, hopefully all of our listeners are learning a few tools to use when you're evaluating a Throughline's hypothesis. And one thing that we really didn't mention that makes it so easy, when you click on one of your matches there in Throughline's and it brings up their match page, right at the top, it will tell you under the 2 names, you and your match, it'll tell you maternal side or paternal side. So it's really easy to check that and see. It's not like you have to do anything special. It's right on your match page. So have some fun. Go check out your Throughline's and see if you can determine some that are accurate, and maybe you can find some that are inaccurate that you'd been believing. And so it's good that we always look at our DNA with an eye to prove or disprove it, realizing we have to do some work. The company can't tell us everything, even though they're giving us a lot of information.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening. We hope that something you heard today will help you make progress in your research. If you want to learn more, purchase our books, Research Like a Pro and Research Like a Pro with DNA on Amazon.com and other booksellers. You can also register for our online courses or study groups of the same names. Learn more at FamilyLocket.com/services. To share your progress and ask questions, join our private Facebook group by sending us your book receipt or joining our courses. To get updates in your email inbox each Monday, subscribe to our newsletter at FamilyLocket.com/newsletter. Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We read each review and are so thankful for them. We hope you'll start now to research like a pro.